When I started researching the Nitobe Japanese Memorial Gardens, I befriended the chief curator there, the head gardener. His name's Rio. And I started talking to him every day, like, when I would go visit him in the garden, I would chat with him. And I started to have this fantasy of like, oh, he studied Japanese garden design. He must have this like deep love for it and like going to work every day because, he goes to the same garden. It's the same aesthetic. It's like the seasons change, but the process of planting and growing this space is the same. It doesn't change. And so I had this whole fantasy of him being like this person who was able to see the same thing and maybe put meaning into this world beyond just like a regular job. Because at the same time I had been struggling with how am I going to tell this story and facing this material that I felt like was unchanging and I couldn't get to the next step. So I was drawing connections between it. And so I went to him and I was asking like, so how do you do this? Like, how do you come here every day and what is the experience of that like? Like, how do you make it meaningful to you or what drives you to do that? He said, well, it's just a job. Like, there's no special meaning here. But it is a job, at the end of the day I go home and I see my family and that's where the meaning is. And he also said that, what makes the garden special for him is when he sees someone who has a moment with a family member in the garden, who's delighted by the garden, who has a profound moment in the space. Like, he had told me that there was a mother and son who'd come there and they had traveled just to see the garden from elsewhere in Canada. And they came right before closing and he was able to keep the garden open for them for a little longer, and that made him feel very touched. And it made me feel better as a person. Like, there doesn't need to be like some profound motivation for what you're doing necessarily. You can be comfortable with what it is.